I thought I knew my wife Claire after 7 years of marriage. I thought our quiet dinners, weekend grocery trips, and bedtime routines meant we were building something real together. I thought when she smiled at me across the breakfast table, it came from somewhere genuine inside her heart. But last Tuesday, while cleaning out her desk to surprise her with a new workspace, I found her diary. 7 leather-bound volumes spanning our entire relationship. And what I read there shattered everything I believed about love, about us, about the woman I'd given my whole heart to. The first entry was from the day we met. Met this guy Marcus today. He seems decent enough, safe, stable. Maybe he's exactly what I need right now. Not a single word about attraction. Not a hint of the butterflies she'd claimed to feel when she told the story to our friends. But it was the progression that really broke me. Page after page of clinical observations about my usefulness, my reliability, my predictability. Like I was some kind of emotional insurance policy she'd invested in. The entries from our wedding day were the worst. While I was writing vows about how she'd become the light of my life, she was writing about how she'd successfully secured her future and how proud she was that she'd played the part so convincingly. But then came the final entry, the one that changed everything, the one that made me question whether I understood anything at all about the woman sleeping next to me every night. The morning everything fell apart started like any other Tuesday. Claire left for her marketing job at the ad agency at exactly 7:47 a.m., right after her usual 2 pieces of wheat toast and black coffee. She kissed my cheek with the same quick peck she'd given me every morning for the past 3 years, said, "Have a good day, honey," in that soft voice I'd grown to love, and walked out the door in her navy blue dress and practical flats. I watched her through the kitchen window as she got into her Honda Civic, the same way I'd been watching her for 7 years. She never looked back at the house, never waved. I used to think it was because she was focused on her day ahead. Now I realize she was just relieved to be escaping. I worked from home as a freelance graphic designer, which meant I spent most of my days in the converted spare bedroom that served as my office. But that Tuesday, I decided to surprise Claire by finally organizing her home office. She'd been complaining for months about how cluttered her desk had become, how she couldn't find anything, how the mess was stressing her out. So I'd taken the day off from client work to tackle the project. Her office was on the 2nd floor, right across from our bedroom. She'd claimed it as her space from the moment we moved into the house 4 years ago, and I'd barely set foot in there since. It was always locked when she wasn't home, and she said she needed privacy to concentrate on her work projects. I respected that. I respected a lot of things I probably shouldn't have. The room was exactly as chaotic as she'd described, papers everywhere, old coffee cups growing interesting science experiments, books stacked in precarious towers that threatened to topple at any moment. I started with the bookshelf, organizing her marketing texts and industry magazines into neat rows. That's when I found the first diary. It was too sad. Tucked behind a row of business books, a leather-bound journal with 2019 embossed in gold on the cover. My stomach dropped the moment I saw it. I knew I shouldn't read it, knew that opening it would be crossing a line we could never uncross. But something about the way it was hidden, almost like she'd been trying to keep it secret even from herself, made my hands shake as I pulled it out. And then I saw there were more. 6 more volumes, dating back to the year we met. 7 years of my wife's private thoughts, carefully chronicled and deliberately concealed. I sat there on her office floor, surrounded by the chaos of her hidden inner world, and felt something cold settle in my chest. The sunlight coming through the window felt different. The house felt different. Everything felt different, and I hadn't even opened a single page yet. I should have put them back. Should have continued organizing her desk and pretended I'd never found them. Should have respected her privacy the way I'd been respecting everything else about our relationship. But I didn't. I opened the first diary to page 1 and began reading about the day we met from her perspective. And right from that first entry, I realized I'd been living in a completely different marriage than my wife had. The entry was dated March 15, 2018. The day we met at Sarah's housewarming party. I remembered every detail of that night like it had been yesterday. Claire in her green sundress, laughing at something by the kitchen island. The way the light caught her hair when she turned to look at me. How nervous I'd been walking over to introduce myself, and how surprised I was when she seemed genuinely interested in talking. We'd spent 3 hours on Sarah's back porch, talking about everything from our college majors to our favorite movies to our dreams for the future. By the end of the night, I was convinced I'd met someone special. Someone who could see past my awkward exterior to whatever was worth loving underneath. Her diary entry told a very different story. Went to Sarah's party tonight, wasn't planning to stay long but ended up talking to this guy Marcus for most of the evening. He's not really my type, kind of quiet and serious, not particularly exciting, but there's something refreshingly honest about him. He actually listens when I talk, which is more than I can say for most guys I meet these days. He's got a stable job doing graphic design, mentioned he's been saving up to buy a house. Lives alone, no crazy ex-girlfriend drama, doesn't seem like the type to cause problems. Maybe that's exactly what I need right now. I'm so tired of dealing with guys who are all flash and no substance. Marcus might be boring, but boring could be good for me. He asked for my number and I gave it to him. We'll see what happens. Boring, that's how she'd described me, not charming or funny or attractive, boring, but potentially useful. I read the entry 3 times, each time hoping I'd misunderstood something, but the words stayed the same. Clinical, calculating, nothing like the woman who'd told our friends she'd felt an instant connection with me that night. I flipped to the next entry, dated 4 days later. Marcus texted me yesterday and asked if I wanted to get coffee. I said yes, figured it couldn't hurt to see where this goes. He picked a nice place downtown, arrived exactly on time, held the door open for me. Very old-fashioned manners, which I appreciate. We talked for 2 hours and he paid for both our drinks without making a big deal about it. He asked thoughtful questions about my job and actually seemed interested in my answers. When he walked me to my car, he didn't try to kiss me or push for anything physical, just asked if he could see me again. I told him I'd like that. I meant it too. There's something comforting about his presence. He's not going to sweep me off my feet or make my heart race, but maybe that's not what I need anymore. Maybe what I need is someone steady, someone safe, someone who won't disappear when things get complicated. The entries continued like that for weeks. Each date we went on, each phone call, each text exchange was documented with the same emotional detachment. She wrote about me like I was a product she was test driving, noting my reliability, my consistency, my willingness to accommodate her schedule. She appreciated that I always paid for dinner. She liked that I didn't pressure her for sex. She found my nervousness around her endearing in a puppy dog sort of way. But nowhere, in pages and pages of entries about our early relationship, did she mention feeling anything that resembled love. Or even strong attraction. I was a good option, a sensible choice, a safe bet in a world full of risky men who might hurt her. My hands were shaking by the time I reached the entry from the night I told her I loved her. We'd been dating for 3 months, and I'd been wrestling with the words for weeks. I was terrified she'd think it was too soon, terrified she wouldn't say it back, terrified I'd ruin everything by being too intense too fast, but the feeling was so overwhelming, so consuming, that I couldn't keep it inside anymore. We were having dinner at this little Italian place she'd mentioned wanting to try. The candlelight was flickering across her face and she was telling me about some project at work, and suddenly I couldn't focus on anything but how much I adored everything about her. Her laugh, her gestures, the way she got animated when she was passionate about something. "I love you," I'd blurted out, right in the middle of her story about a difficult client. She'd stopped talking and looked at me with those bright blue eyes, and for a moment that lasted forever, I thought she was going to tell me I'd made a mistake, but then she smiled, reached across the table to take my hand, and said, "I love you too, Marcus." It was the happiest moment of my life up to that point. Her diary entry from that night told a different story. Marcus told me he loved me tonight at dinner. I could see it coming from a mile away. He's been getting that look in his eyes for weeks now, like he's working up the courage to say something important. When he finally said it, he looked so hopeful and vulnerable that I couldn't bring myself to hurt him. So I told him I loved him too. It's not entirely untrue. I do love him, in a way. Love his kindness, love his stability, love how safe I feel with him. He's a good man who deserves to be loved properly. I just don't know if I'm capable of loving anyone the way he loves me. But maybe that's okay. Maybe love doesn't have to be passionate to be real. Maybe comfortable love is better than no love at all. He looked so happy when I said it back. I don't think I've ever made anyone that happy just by saying 3 words. There's something powerful in that, something I could get used to. I closed the first diary and sat there in the silence of her office, trying to process what I'd just read. 6 months of my life, 6 months of falling head over heels for someone who saw me as a convenient solution to her problems. 6 months of believing we were building something beautiful together, while she was conducting some kind of emotional experiment on both of us. The rational part of my brain knew I should stop reading, knew that going deeper into her private thoughts would only hurt me more. But I couldn't stop. I needed to understand how deep this went, needed to know if there had ever been a moment when she'd felt for me what I felt for her. I opened the second diary, dated 2019, the year we moved in together. I remembered that decision as a natural progression of our relationship. We'd been dating for almost a year, spending most nights at each other's places anyway. My lease was up for renewal and her roommate was moving out, so it seemed like perfect timing. I'd been nervous about bringing it up, worried she'd think I was moving too fast, but when I finally suggested it, she'd seemed genuinely excited about the idea. "I can't wait to wake up next to you every morning," she'd said, curled up against my chest in her bed. "I can't wait to build a real home with you." Her diary told a more practical story. "Marcus brought up the idea of moving in together last night. I've been expecting this conversation for a while now. We've basically been living together unofficially for months anyway. From a financial standpoint, it makes perfect sense. His apartment is bigger and in a better neighborhood, plus he's offering to cover most of the rent since he makes more money than I do. I'd be able to save a significant amount every month, which would help me pay off my student loans faster. Beyond the money, there are other advantages. He's incredibly domestic. He actually enjoys cooking and cleaning, which are chores I've always hated. He's reliable about taking care of practical things like bills and maintenance, and he's made it clear that he's completely committed to this relationship, so I don't have to worry about him suddenly deciding he wants to see other people." I told him yes. The look of pure joy on his face was almost overwhelming. He started talking immediately about furniture we'd need to buy, about how we'd organize the space, about little domestic details that made it clear he's been thinking about this for a long time. He sees this as a major step toward a future together. Marriage, probably, eventually. The thought doesn't scare me the way it should. Marcus would make a good husband. Dependable, caring, financially stable, completely devoted to making me happy. A lot of women would kill for what I have with him. Maybe I should be more grateful. The entries from our first few months living together were a mixture of appreciation and mild frustration. She liked having someone to split the bills with. She loved that I did most of the cooking and cleaning without being asked. She appreciated that I was considerate about giving her space when she needed it. But she also wrote about feeling suffocated sometimes by his constant attention and how his eagerness to please can be exhausting. She noted how I'd rearrange my entire schedule around hers, how I'd cancel plans with friends if she wanted to spend the evening together, how I'd defer to her preferences on everything from what to watch on TV to what restaurant to order from. She saw my devotion, but instead of being touched by it, she seemed almost irritated by it. "Sometimes I feel like I'm living with a golden retriever," she wrote in October 2019. "He's so eager to make me happy that he forgets to have opinions of his own. I wish he'd push back on something, anything, just to prove he has a backbone, but then I feel guilty for thinking that way because he's doing everything he can to be a good partner. Maybe the problem isn't him, maybe the problem is me." That entry hit me like a physical blow. I'd spent those months working so hard to be the perfect boyfriend, so terrified of doing anything that might make her unhappy or cause her to leave. I'd thought I was being romantic, being considerate. I'd thought she appreciated how much I cared. But apparently, my love had felt like a burden to her, like something she had to manage rather than something she could enjoy. I kept reading, desperate to find some sign that her feelings for me had deepened over time, that living together had helped her fall in love with me properly. But month after month, the entries remained the same, grateful but distant, appreciative but not passionate. She wrote about our relationship like it was a business arrangement that was working out well for both parties. The entry that broke my heart completely was from Valentine's Day 2020. I'd spent weeks planning that day, wanting to show her how much she meant to me, I'd made reservations at the nicest restaurant in town, bought her a necklace with her birthstone, written her a long letter about all the ways she'd changed my life for the better. I'd thought it was the most romantic thing I'd ever done. She'd seemed genuinely moved by the gesture, had worn the necklace to dinner and kept touching it throughout the meal. She'd read my letter twice and kissed me softly afterward, telling me it was the sweetest thing anyone had ever done for her. Her diary entry from that night was led guilt. Marcus went completely overboard for Valentine's Day today. Expensive dinner, beautiful jewelry, a 3-page handwritten letter that probably took him hours to write. He put so much thought and effort into making the day special for me. The letter especially got to me. He wrote about how I make him want to be a better person, how he can't imagine his life without me, how grateful he is that I chose him. When I finished reading it, I had to excuse myself to go to the bathroom because I started crying. But not for the reason he probably thought. I was crying because I felt like such a fraud. Here's this wonderful man pouring his heart out to me, telling me I'm the love of his life, and all I can think about is how I wish I could feel even half of what he feels. He deserves someone who loves him the way he loves me, someone whose heart races when he walks into a room, someone who can't wait to see him at the end of a long day, someone who doesn't have to work so hard to seem excited about romantic gestures. I care about him deeply, I enjoy his company, I'm grateful for his kindness and devotion. But is that enough? Is it fair to let him believe I'm as invested in this relationship as he is when I'm not sure I'm capable of that kind of love? Sometimes I think I should end things before we go any deeper. Let him find someone who can give him what he deserves. But then I think about how devastated he'd be, and I can't bring myself to hurt him like that. And if I'm being completely honest, I don't want to lose what we have. Even if it's not the grand passion he thinks it is, it's still good, it's still valuable. Maybe that has to be enough. By the time I reached the entries about our engagement, I felt numb, hollow. Like someone had reached inside my chest and scraped out everything that made me feel human. The proposal had happened in December 2020, during our weekend trip to the mountains. We'd been hiking all morning, and when we reached this overlook with a perfect view of the valley below, I'd gotten down on one knee. I'd rehearsed the speech for weeks, but when the moment came, all my careful words disappeared. I just looked at her standing there in the morning sunlight, her cheeks flushed from the cold air, and said, "Claire, you're the best thing that's ever happened to me. Will you marry me?" She'd said yes immediately, thrown her arms around my neck and kissed me like she meant it. We'd both been crying when she finally looked at the ring. She'd told me it was perfect, that I was perfect, that she couldn't wait to be my wife. For the rest of that weekend, she'd kept staring at the ring on her finger with this amazed expression, like she couldn't believe it was real. Her diary entry from that day was matter-of-fact and strategic. Marcus proposed today during our hike. I knew it was coming. He's been acting nervous and secretive for weeks, plus he insisted on bringing his good camera on what was supposed to be a casual hiking trip. The ring is beautiful, probably cost him more than he could really afford knowing him. He looked so hopeful kneeling there in the dirt, so convinced that I'd say yes. Of course I said yes. We've been together for 2.5 years, living together for more than a year. This is the logical next step. He'd be a good husband. He's already proven he'd be a good provider and partner. He's kind, reliable, completely committed to making me happy. He'll never cheat on me or abandon me or put his own needs before mine. Marrying him is the smart choice. The safe choice. So, people might say that's not enough reason to marry someone, but I think those people are naive about how relationships actually work. Passion fades. Looks fade. Financial security and emotional stability are what matter in the long run. Marcus can give me both of those things. Plus, I do love him. Maybe not in the desperate, all-consuming way he loves me, but love takes many forms. The love I feel for him is steady and comfortable and real. It's the kind of love that lasts. I think I can build a good life with him. I think I can be happy, and I know he'll be happy, which is almost as important. He deserves to be happy. She'd written about our engagement party like it was a performance she was giving. She'd noted which relatives seemed impressed by the ring, which friends made comments about what a perfect couple we were, which conversations she'd navigated successfully to maintain the image of a blissfully happy bride-to-be. She'd been studying me, I realized, watching my interactions with others, noting my responses to different situations, cataloging information about what made me feel secure or insecure, like she was preparing for a role she'd have to play for the rest of her life. The entries about wedding planning were even worse. Every decision we made together, the venue, the flowers, the menu, the music, she wrote about in terms of what would make me happy rather than what she actually wanted. She'd discovered early on that I was so eager to please her that I'd go along with almost anything she suggested, so she'd started making choices based on what would be most practical or cost-effective rather than what she preferred. Marcus asked me today what kind of wedding dress I wanted, she wrote in March 2021. I told him I wanted something simple and classic, but the truth is, I don't really care. I know he's picturing me in some princess gown with a long train and elaborate beadwork, but that's not me. It's not who I am. But I also know that if I chose something too unconventional, he'd worry that I wasn't taking the wedding seriously. So I'll find something that looks bridal enough to satisfy his romantic expectations while still being practical enough for me to feel comfortable wearing. It's strange how much of my life now revolves around managing his expectations and emotions. Not in a bad way, exactly. He doesn't demand it from me. But his happiness depends so much on feeling like I'm as invested in our relationship as he is, that I find myself constantly performing enthusiasm I don't entirely feel. Sometimes I wonder what would happen if I just told him the truth about how I feel. If I sat him down and explained that I care about him deeply, but I'm not sure I'm capable of the kind of passionate love he feels for me. Would he still want to marry me? Would he think it was enough? Or would it destroy him to know that the woman he's devoted his life to sees him more as a best friend than a great love? She never found out because she never told me. Instead, she walked down the aisle on September 18, 2021, in a dress she'd chosen based on what she thought I wanted to see, and promised to love me for the rest of her life while privately wondering if what she felt for me qualified as love at all. The wedding entries were the hardest to read because I remembered that day as pure magic. Claire had looked absolutely radiant walking down the aisle, her smile bright enough to light up the entire church. During our vows, tears had streamed down her face as she promised to love me, honor me, and choose me every day for the rest of our lives. When the officiant pronounced us husband and wife and I kissed her for the first time as her husband, I felt like the luckiest man alive. The reception had been perfect. Claire had danced with me to our song, At Last, by Etta James, and whispered in my ear that she couldn't believe she got to call me her husband. She'd been charming and gracious with all our guests, the perfect bride, glowing with happiness. Or so I'd thought. Her diary entry from that night painted a completely different picture. I'm married, Mrs. Claire Peterson. It feels surreal to write that. The wedding was beautiful. Marcus spared no expense making sure everything was perfect. The flowers were gorgeous, the food was delicious, the venue looked like something out of a fairy tale. Everyone kept telling me how happy I looked, how beautiful I was, how lucky Marcus and I were to have found each other. I smiled and thanked them and played the part of the blissful bride, and honestly, for most of the day, it didn't feel like playing a part. I was happy. Maybe not in the delirious, over-the-moon way that Marcus was happy, but genuinely content. This was a good decision. This was the right choice for my life. During our first dance, Marcus whispered to me that he couldn't believe I was his wife, that he was going to spend every day making sure I never regretted saying yes to him. The sincerity in his voice almost broke my heart. He means every word. He really will spend the rest of his life trying to make me happy, probably at the expense of his own happiness. Say, times, that's both a beautiful gift and a terrible responsibility. I whispered back that I loved him, and I meant it. I do love him. Just maybe not the way he loves me. But maybe that's okay. Maybe all marriages have some imbalance in feeling. Maybe what matters is commitment and partnership and choosing to build a life together. Maybe the kind of passionate, all-consuming love that Marcus feels for me is actually kind of rare, and most people settle for something more practical. Maybe I'm overthinking this. Maybe I should just be grateful for what I have and stop analyzing it to death. But she didn't stop analyzing it. The entries from our honeymoon were filled with observations about my behavior, my reactions, my obvious happiness at being married to her. She wrote about feeling like she was performing the role of happy newlywed, making sure to seem sufficiently romantic and affectionate to match my enthusiasm. Marcus is so attentive and sweet, she wrote from our hotel in Hawaii. He keeps asking if I'm happy, if there's anything he can do to make the trip more perfect for me. He's planned every detail around what he thinks I'll enjoy, never considering what he might want to do. Yesterday I suggested we try surfing and he immediately booked us lessons, even though I could tell he was nervous about it. He ended up hating every minute. He's not athletic and he was clearly uncomfortable in the water, but he kept smiling and telling me how glad he was that we were doing it together. I wish he would just say when he doesn't want to do something. I wish he would have preferences and opinions that don't revolve around me. Sometimes I feel like I'm married to a reflection of myself rather than a separate person. The pattern continued after we returned home. She documented my efforts to be a good husband, how I'd bring her coffee in bed every morning, how I'd take care of all the household repairs without being asked, how I'd rearrange my work schedule to accommodate her social plans. She appreciated these gestures, but she wrote about them with the detachment of someone cataloging the services provided by a particularly attentive hotel staff. What hurt the most were the entries about our intimate life. I'd thought we had a good physical relationship. Claire had never complained, never seemed dissatisfied. She was affectionate and responsive, and I'd felt like we were genuinely connected in those moments. But her diary revealed that she'd been managing that aspect of our marriage too. Marcus is a considerate lover, she wrote a few months after our wedding. He's never selfish, always makes sure I'm satisfied before himself. He tells me constantly how beautiful I am, how much he desires me, how perfect our physical relationship is. I think he genuinely believes that's true. For him, the emotional connection we have, or that he thinks we have, makes the physical side more meaningful. I envy that. I wish I could feel that way. The physical part of our marriage is fine, pleasant even. But it doesn't transport me the way it seems to transport him. I find myself thinking about other things sometimes, making grocery lists in my head or planning my schedule for the following day. I make the right sounds and responses because I know it makes him happy, because I know he needs to feel like he's satisfying me. But sometimes I feel like an actor in a play that only one person in the audience believes is real. By the time I reached the entries from our second year of marriage, I felt like I was reading about the life of a stranger. This woman who shared my bed every night, who cooked dinner with me and watched movies with me and met my family for holidays, she was essentially performing the role of Marcus Peterson's wife while living an entirely separate emotional life in her head. She wrote about learning to mimic enthusiasm for things I cared about. She studied my moods and reactions so she could anticipate what I needed from her. She perfected the art of seeming present and engaged while mentally detaching herself from our interactions. I've gotten good at being Marcus's wife, she wrote in August 2022. I know exactly what to say when he's had a bad day at work. I know how to respond when he wants to talk about his dreams for our future. I know which topics to avoid because they make him anxious and which ones to bring up because they make him feel confident and happy. I've learned to read his body language, his tone of voice, his silences. Managing his emotional needs has become second nature to me. Sometimes I feel like I'm his therapist more than his wife. But maybe that's not entirely fair. He's not demanding or difficult. He doesn't expect me to fix all his problems or be responsible for his happiness. If anything, he tries too hard to manage his own emotions so he won't burden me with them. The problem is that he loves me so much that my mood determines his mood. If I seem sad, he becomes anxious about what he might have done wrong. If I seem happy, he lights up like a Christmas tree. It's exhausting to have that much power over someone else's emotional state. I can't have a bad day without worrying about how it will affect him. I can't be in a neutral mood without him asking what's wrong. I feel like I'm constantly performing happiness to keep our household stable. The fourth diary covered 2023, the year we started talking seriously about having children. I'd been bringing up the topic for months, mentioning how much I looked forward to being a father, how beautiful I thought Claire would be as a mother, how excited I was to start that chapter of our lives together. She'd seemed receptive to the idea, though she'd wanted to wait until we were more financially stable. We'd had long conversations about names and parenting philosophies and what kind of childhood we wanted to give our kids. I'd thought we were on the same page about building a family together. Her diary entries revealed that she'd been approaching the topic of children the same way she'd approached everything else in our marriage, as a decision to be made, based on practical considerations, rather than genuine desire. Marcus has been hinting more and more about wanting to start trying for a baby, she wrote in February 2023. I can see how much he wants this. He gets this dreamy look in his eyes when he talks about teaching our kids to ride bikes or helping them with homework. He's already planning the nursery in his head, already picking out bedtime stories he wants to read to them. He'll be a wonderful father. Patient, involved, completely devoted to his children the way he's devoted to me. From an objective standpoint, now would be a good time to have a baby. We're both financially stable, we own our home, we have good health insurance. I'm 29, which is a good age to start having children if we want more than one. Marcus is 31 and definitely ready for the responsibility. All the practical pieces are in place. The question is whether I want this for myself, or whether I'm just going along with it because it's what Marcus wants and what's expected of me at this stage of my life. I've never felt a strong maternal instinct. I don't coo over babies the way other women do. I don't get excited about children's clothing or nursery decorations. When I try to picture myself as a mother, I feel nothing. Not excitement, not fear, just a kind of blank numbness. But maybe that's normal. Maybe not every woman feels called to motherhood in some deep, primal way. Maybe some of us just make the logical choice to have children because it's the next step in building a stable adult life. Maybe love for your children develops after they're born, not before. Marcus would be so happy if I told him I was ready to start trying. And maybe having a baby would be good for our marriage. It would give us a shared focus, a common goal that goes beyond just making each other happy. It might help me feel more connected to him, more invested in our life together, or it might make me feel even more trapped in a role I'm not sure I'm suited for. She'd started tracking her cycle that spring, not because she was excited about getting pregnant, but because she'd decided it was time to move forward with the next logical phase of their life plan. She wrote about ovulation windows and fertility apps with the same detached efficiency she brought to everything else in our marriage. When we'd finally had the conversation about officially trying for a baby, she told me she was ready, that she wanted to start our family. I'd been overjoyed, had swept her up in my arms and spun her around the kitchen, talking about how perfect our children would be and how amazing it would be to see her holding our baby for the first time. Her diary entry from that night was clinical and sad. Told Marcus tonight that I'm ready to start trying for a baby. His reaction was everything I expected, pure joy, immediate excitement, lots of talk about our future as parents. He's already mentally painting the nursery and researching the best schools in our district. I smiled and nodded and tried to match his enthusiasm. Maybe the enthusiasm will come later, maybe once I'm actually pregnant, some kind of maternal instinct will kick in and I'll understand what all the fuss is about. Or maybe I'll just be a practical, competent mother, the way I'm a practical, competent wife. Maybe that's enough. We'd tried for 8 months before she got pregnant in November 2023. I remembered those months as hopeful and romantic. We'd been more physically intimate than we'd been since our honeymoon, and I'd felt like we were working together towards something meaningful. Each month when her period came, we'd comfort each other and promise to keep trying. I thought it brought us closer together. But her diary entries from that time revealed that she'd been going through the motions of trying to conceive while feeling increasingly disconnected from the process and from me. Month 6 of trying and still not pregnant, she wrote in September 2023. Marcus is starting to worry that something might be wrong, though he's trying not to let it show. He's been researching fertility supplements and optimal timing and all the things people do when they're desperate to make a baby. His dedication would be touching if I felt the same urgency he feels. But I don't. Part of me is almost relieved each month when my period arrives. It means I get to postpone becoming a mother for another month, postpone the enormous responsibility and life change that pregnancy will bring. I feel guilty for feeling relieved. Marcus would be devastated if he knew I wasn't as eager for this to happen as he is. But I can't help wondering if my body is trying to tell me something. Maybe some part of me knows I'm not ready to be a mother. Maybe some part of me knows I'm not capable of loving a child the way Marcus would love our child. When she finally did get pregnant, her diary entry was a mixture of resignation and performance anxiety. 2 pink lines on the pregnancy test this morning. I'm pregnant, Marcus cried when I showed him the test, actual tears of joy streaming down his face. He kept saying, "We did it, we're going to be parents," over and over while holding me. His happiness was so pure, so overwhelming, that I found myself crying too. But I'm not sure if I was crying from joy or from fear. This is really happening. In 9 months, I'm going to be responsible for another human being. I'm going to have to love this baby the way it deserves to be loved, the way Marcus will love it. What if I can't? What if the same emotional numbness that affects my marriage affects my ability to be a good mother? But maybe I'm overthinking this. Maybe pregnancy will change me, awaken some maternal instinct I didn't know I had. Maybe when I hold our baby for the first time, I'll finally understand what everyone talks about when they describe that overwhelming rush of love. Maybe this baby will be the thing that makes me feel as deeply as Marcus feels about everything. The pregnancy entries were the most heartbreaking thing I'd ever read. While I'd been excitedly documenting every milestone, the first ultrasound, the first time we heard the heartbeat, the day we found out we were having a girl, Claire had been documenting her growing anxiety about becoming a mother while pretending to share my excitement. 12 weeks along today, she wrote in February 2024. We told our families over the weekend. Everyone is so excited. My mom cried. Marcus's parents immediately started talking about converting their spare room into a nursery for when we visit. Marcus glows every time someone congratulates him. He's already talking to my belly, telling the baby about all the things he wants to show her, all the places he wants to take her. His devotion to this child who doesn't even exist yet is incredible. I feel like a fraud sitting there smiling while everyone celebrates. I should be as excited as they are. I should be feeling some kind of maternal bond developing as the baby grows inside me. But mostly I just feel tired and nauseous and overwhelmed by how much my life is about to change. Marcus has started reading parenting books and researching car seats and cribs. He asks me constantly how I'm feeling, if there's anything he can do to make me more comfortable. He brings me ginger tea for the morning sickness and rubs my feet when they're sore. He's going to be such a good father. I just hope I can figure out how to be a good mother. She'd miscarried at 16 weeks. I remembered that day like it was burned into my memory. The cramping that started in the middle of the night, the bleeding, the panicked drive to the hospital, the doctor's gentle voice telling us there was no heartbeat. I'd held Claire while she sobbed, both of us devastated by the loss of our daughter. We'd named her Emma, had a small memorial service, planted a tree in our backyard in her honor. It had taken months for both of us to heal from that loss. Her diary entry from the night we lost Emma revealed that her grief was complicated by guilt and relief, emotions she couldn't share with me because she knew I wouldn't understand. We lost the baby today, Emma. She was so close to being viable, just a few more weeks and she might have survived. The doctor said these things just happen sometimes, that it wasn't anything I did or didn't do. But I can't help wondering if somehow my ambivalence about becoming a mother contributed to this. If my body knew I wasn't ready and rejected the pregnancy because I wasn't capable of loving her enough. Marcus is heartbroken, completely devastated. He'd already bonded with Emma so completely, had already planned out her entire childhood in his head. Watching him grieve is almost harder than dealing with my own grief. His pain is so pure, so profound. He loved her absolutely from the moment we found out she existed. I envied that. Even now, even after losing her, I envy his ability to love so completely. My grief is more complicated. I am sad about losing Emma. I did want her, in my way. But mixed in with the sadness is this terrible relief that I don't have to prove I can be a good mother, that I don't have to figure out how to love a child when I'm still figuring out how to love my husband. I feel guilty for feeling relieved. What kind of woman feels relieved after losing a baby? What kind of monster am I? We'd tried again 6 months later, but it took over a year to get pregnant the second time. During those months of trying, I'd been patient and supportive, but I could see the toll the miscarriage had taken on Claire. She seemed more distant, more anxious. I'd thought it was just grief and the stress of trying to conceive again. I'd had no idea she was wrestling with fundamental questions about whether she was capable of being the mother and wife that our future family deserved. Her diary entries from that period showed her trying to convince herself to feel things she didn't naturally feel, to want things she wasn't sure she actually wanted. Started tracking my cycle again this month, she wrote in March 2024. Marcus has been so patient about waiting until I was ready to try again, but I can see how much he wants another baby. He still talks about Emma sometimes, about how she would have been walking by now, starting to say her first words. His longing for children is so deep, so fundamental to who he is. I need to figure out how to match that longing, or at least fake it convincingly enough that he doesn't realize how ambivalent I still feel about motherhood. Maybe the second pregnancy will be different. Maybe I'll feel more connected to the baby, more excited about becoming a mother. Maybe losing Emma taught me something about how precious children are, how much I actually do want them. Or maybe I'm just going through the motions because it's what's expected of me, because it's what Marcus needs from me to be happy. Sometimes I think I should tell him the truth about how I feel. But how do you tell your husband that you're not sure you want the children he dreams about? How do you admit that you might not be capable of the kind of love that parenthood requires? It would destroy him, and it would probably destroy our marriage too. The second pregnancy happened in January 2025, just 2 months ago. She was now 12 weeks along, and we'd just started telling people. I'd been cautiously optimistic this time, trying not to get too attached too early but still feeling that familiar excitement about our growing family. Claire had seemed more relaxed about this pregnancy, more genuinely happy. Or so I'd thought. Her recent diary entries showed that she'd gotten better at performing enthusiasm, but her fundamental doubts about motherhood and marriage hadn't changed. They'd just gotten more sophisticated, more buried under layers of practiced responses and carefully managed expectations. 12 weeks today, her most recent entry read. Same milestone where we lost Emma. I'm terrified something will go wrong again, but also terrified that everything will go right and I'll actually have to be a mother this time. Marcus is being so careful not to get too excited, but I can see the hope in his eyes every time he looks at me. He's already started thinking about names, about how we'll decorate the nursery, about what Emma would think about having a little brother or sister. He assumes I'm thinking about the same things. I let him assume that because it makes him happy, but mostly I'm thinking about how much my life is about to change and whether I'm strong enough to handle it, whether I'm good enough to deserve the family Marcus wants to build with me. But it was the final entry, dated just 3 days ago, that completely shattered my understanding of everything I'd been reading. After pages and pages of clinical detachment, after years of documenting her emotional distance from our marriage, Claire had written something that changed everything. The entry was longer than usual, more personal, more raw. It was titled, Learning to Love. Something happened today that I can't stop thinking about. Marcus and I were having breakfast, just our usual Tuesday morning routine. Toast and coffee, checking our schedules for the day, making small talk about nothing important. Normal married couple conversation. But then he got this text from his client about a project deadline being moved up, and I could see immediately how stressed it made him. His whole body tensed up, his jaw got tight, and he got that little worry line between his eyebrows that appears whenever he's anxious about work. Without thinking, I reached across the table and took his hand. Just a simple gesture, the kind of thing I've done 1,000 times before to comfort him. But this time was different. This time, when I touched him, I felt something I don't think I've ever felt before. Not just the familiar fondness or appreciation or even love that I've written about so many times in these pages. This was something deeper, something that started in my chest and spread through my whole body like warmth. I looked at his face, really looked at it, not just glancing at him while thinking about something else, and I saw him. Not Marcus my reliable husband, not Marcus my convenient partner, not Marcus the father of my children. I saw Marcus the person, the man who brings me coffee every morning without being asked, who remembers that I like the temperature in the bedroom exactly 2 degrees cooler than he does and never complains about it, who learned to make my grandmother's soup recipe after she died because he knew it would comfort me. Who cried harder than I did when we lost Emma because he knew I was trying to be strong for him. Who has spent 7 years of his life trying to make me happy, never asking for anything in return except that I let him love me. And for the first time, maybe ever, I felt grateful not just for the things he does for me, but for who he is. I felt lucky not just because he's a good husband, but because he's the specific person that he is. I felt love, real love, the kind that doesn't make sense, that doesn't come from practical considerations or logical analysis, the kind that just exists because the other person exists. It was overwhelming. I had to excuse myself to go to the bathroom because I started crying, and I didn't want him to worry that something was wrong with the baby, but nothing was wrong. For the first time in years, everything felt right. I've been thinking about it all day, this feeling that came out of nowhere. Or maybe it didn't come out of nowhere. Maybe it's been building slowly, so slowly that I didn't notice it happening. Maybe love isn't always instantaneous. Maybe sometimes it grows quietly in the background while you're busy looking for it in more obvious places. I've spent so much time in these pages analyzing my feelings for Marcus, questioning whether what I felt for him was enough, worrying that I was cheating him out of the kind of passionate love he deserves. But maybe I was wrong about what love looks like. Maybe the steady, comfortable affection I've felt for him all these years wasn't the absence of love, maybe it was love growing roots. Maybe it was love getting stronger and deeper in ways I didn't recognize because I was expecting it to feel different. Marcus has never needed me to be breathless with passion for him. He's never needed grand romantic gestures or dramatic declarations. What he's needed is exactly what I've been giving him all along: my presence, my partnership, my commitment to building a life together. What he's needed is for me to choose him every day, even when it wasn't exciting or overwhelming or cinematic, and I have been choosing him. I chose him when I said yes to moving in together. I chose him when I said yes to his proposal. I chose him when I walked down the aisle and promised to be his wife. I chose him when we decided to try for children. I've been choosing him every morning when I wake up next to him, every evening when I come home to him, every ordinary Tuesday when we sit across from each other eating toast and planning our day. Maybe that's what love actually is. Not the lightning bolt moment I've been waiting for, but the 1,000 small moments of choosing each other. Not the overwhelming passion I thought I was supposed to feel, but the deep contentment of being known and accepted and valued exactly as I am. I think I've been in love with Marcus for years and just didn't recognize it because it didn't match the version of love I had in my head. The version that's supposed to be dramatic and consuming and obvious. But maybe quiet love is still real love. Maybe steady love is actually better than passionate love because it lasts longer, goes deeper, survives the ordinary difficulties of building a real life together. I want to tell him. I want to explain that I finally understand what he's been trying to show me all these years, that I finally feel what he's been feeling. But how do I explain 7 years of not knowing I was in love? How do I tell him that I've been learning to love him this whole time without even realizing it? Maybe I don't need to explain, maybe I just need to love him better from now on. Maybe I need to stop analyzing what I feel, and just feel it. Maybe I need to stop performing the role of Marcus's wife and just be Marcus's wife, fully, completely, with a ways. All the messy, complicated, beautiful feelings that come with really loving someone. I'm 32 years old and I think I'm finally figuring out how to be in love. Better late than never, right? I closed the final diary and sat in the silence of Claire's office, surrounded by the scattered evidence of her hidden inner life. My hands were shaking, my chest felt tight. 7 years of marriage, and I'd had no idea what was really going on in my wife's head and heart, no idea that she'd been wrestling with questions about love and commitment and whether she was capable of feeling what I felt for her. No idea that what I'd interpreted as contentment and affection had actually been careful performance mixed with genuine but uncertain emotion. No idea that she'd been learning to love me this whole time. The rational part of my brain was hurt. Devastated, actually. Finding out that your wife spent years seeing you as a convenient solution to her problems, that she'd approached your marriage like a business arrangement, that she'd been performing enthusiasm for the relationship you thought was the center of both your worlds, it was crushing. Every romantic moment we'd shared, every intimate conversation, every time she told me she loved me, I now had to wonder if it had been genuine or just another part of the role she was playing. But there was another part of me, a part I wasn't sure I wanted to acknowledge, that felt something like relief. Because that final entry changed everything. It reframed every clinical observation, every practical consideration, every moment of emotional distance as part of a journey rather than a permanent state. Claire hadn't been incapable of loving me. She'd been learning how. And maybe that was actually more meaningful than if she'd fallen for me instantly and completely. Maybe love that develops slowly, that grows from respect and partnership and daily choice, is actually stronger than love that hits like lightning. Maybe the fact that she'd chosen to stay with me, to build a life with me, to keep trying to feel what I felt for her. Even when it would have been easier to leave, maybe that was its own kind of love. A different kind than what I'd thought we had, but not necessarily a lesser kind. I thought about all the ways she'd shown love over the years, even if she hadn't recognized it as love at the time. The way she'd learned to read my moods and needs, the way she'd made space for my interests and dreams even when they weren't hers. The way she'd comforted me when I was anxious, celebrated with me when I was happy, supported me through difficulties at work and with my family. The way she'd tried to want the same things I wanted, tried to build the future I was dreaming of, even when she wasn't sure those things came naturally to her. Maybe that had been love all along. Maybe I'd been so focused on whether she felt the same intensity of emotion that I felt that I'd missed all the ways she was actually loving me. Quietly, practically, consistently. Maybe the problem wasn't that she didn't love me. Maybe the problem was that we both had narrow definitions of what love was supposed to look like. I heard the front door open downstairs. Claire was home from work, right on schedule. In a few minutes, she'd come upstairs to change out of her work clothes and probably find me sitting here in her office, surrounded by her most private thoughts. I should put the diaries back where I found them, should pretend I'd never read them, should let her keep her privacy and her secrets and her slow journey toward understanding her own heart. But I couldn't do that, not after reading that final entry, not after learning that she'd finally figured out what I'd been trying to show her for 7 years. "Marcus?" Her voice carried up the stairs. "I'm home, how was your day?" I took a deep breath and called back, "I'm up here, Claire, in your office, we need to talk." I heard her footsteps on the stairs, light and quick. She always took the steps 2 at a time when she was in a good mood. A few seconds later, she appeared in the doorway of her office, still wearing her navy blue work dress, her purse slung over her shoulder. She looked beautiful, like she always did, but now I found myself studying her face differently, looking for signs of the complex emotional life I now knew she'd been living parallel to our marriage. "What are you doing in here?" she asked, glancing around at the partially organized chaos of her desk. Then her eyes landed on the stack of diaries in my lap, and her entire body went still. The color drained from her face. Her purse slipped off her shoulder and hit the floor with a soft thud. "Marcus," she whispered. Did you read those?" I nodded, not trusting my voice yet. We stared at each other across the small room, and I could see her mind racing, trying to figure out how much I knew, how much damage had been done, whether our marriage could survive this violation of her privacy. "How much?" she asked quietly. "All of it," I said. "All 7 volumes, from the day we met until 3 days ago." She closed her eyes and leaned back against the doorframe, like she needed the support to stay upright. When she opened them again, there were tears starting to form. "I'm sorry," she said. "I'm so sorry, Marcus. I never meant for you to see those. I never meant for you to know." "Know what?" I asked. "That you didn't love me when we got married, that you saw me as a practical choice instead of a romantic one, that you've been performing the role of my wife for 7 years. Each question felt like I was pulling glass out of a wound, painful but necessary. She flinched with each one. "It wasn't like that," she said. "I mean, it was, but it wasn't only that. Marcus, you don't understand." "Then help me understand," I said, standing up and setting the diaries on her desk. "Help me understand how the woman I've been madly in love with for 7 years has been documenting our entire relationship like it was some kind of experiment. Help me understand how you could marry me, try to have children with me, build a whole life with me while secretly wondering if you were capable of loving me at all." The tears were flowing freely now, and seeing her cry made my chest ache the way it always did. Even now, even after reading about years of emotional detachment, my instinct was to comfort her. "I did love you," she said. "I do love you, I didn't understand what love was supposed to feel like. I thought it was supposed to be this overwhelming, passionate thing that happens immediately. I thought if I didn't feel that for you, it meant I was broken or wrong or cheating you somehow." "So you decided to marry me anyway?" I asked. "Even though you thought you didn't love me properly?" "Because I thought what I felt for you was the best I could do," she said. "Because I thought you deserved to be with someone who cared about you, even if that someone couldn't love you the way you loved them. Because I thought maybe it would be enough." She wiped her eyes with the back of her hand, smearing her makeup. "Marcus, I know how this sounds. I know how cruel it must seem to read about yourself being analyzed and evaluated like some kind of investment opportunity. But you have to understand, I was trying to talk myself into feeling something I thought I was supposed to feel. I was trying to figure out if what I did feel for you counted as love. And what did you conclude? I asked. She looked at me for a long moment, her eyes red and vulnerable. That I've been an idiot for 7 years, she said. That I was so busy looking for some specific kind of love, that I missed the love that was actually there. That I've been in love with you this whole time and just didn't recognize it because it didn't match what I thought love was supposed to look like. I read the last entry, I said quietly. About the morning you finally felt it. A fresh wave of tears started. That wasn't the first time I felt it, she said. That was just the first time I recognized what I was feeling. Marcus, I've felt that way about you hundreds of times over the years, thousands of times, every time you took care of me when I was sick, every time you remembered some little thing that mattered to me, every time you put my needs before yours without making a big deal about it, every time you looked at me like I was the most important person in your world. Then why didn't you write about those moments? I asked. Why did you only write about the doubts and the analysis and the feeling like you were performing? Because I was scared, she said, because I thought if I acknowledged how much you meant to me, it would make it worse that I couldn't love you the right way, because I thought loving you quietly and steadily wasn't enough compared to how dramatically and completely you loved me. She stepped into the room, moving closer to me. Marcus, can I tell you something? Reading those diaries back to yourself, seeing our entire relationship through my eyes, it must have been horrible. But there's something I never wrote down, something I never documented, because I didn't think it was worth analyzing. What? I asked. How safe you made me feel, she said. How completely I trusted you, right from the beginning. How you were the first person I ever met who I knew would never hurt me on purpose, never leave me, never make me question my worth. That's not nothing, Marcus, that's everything. I just didn't understand that safety and trust and partnership could be love. I thought they were just prerequisites for love, things that had to exist before the real love could start. But they were love, I said, finally understanding. They were your way of loving me. She nodded. And choosing you every day, even when it wasn't exciting or dramatic, and building a life with you that made us both better people, and wanting to give you children because I could see how good you'd be as a father, and feeling proud when people met you because you reflected well on my choices, and missing you when you were gone, even if it was just for a few hours. Claire, I said, and my voice came out rough. All this time, I thought our marriage was perfect. I thought we were both deliriously happy. I had no idea you were struggling with any of this. Our marriage was perfect, she said. Not because we both felt the same things at the same time, but because we were both committed to making it work, because we both chose each other every day, even when it was complicated, because we built something good together, even if we built it differently. She was close enough now that I could see the flecks of gold in her blue eyes, could smell the faint scent of her perfume. Marcus, I need you to know something. Everything I wrote in those diaries, all my doubts and questions and analysis, none of that was about you not being enough. It was about me not understanding my own heart. You've been exactly the husband I needed. You've loved me better than I thought it was possible to be loved. The problem was never you. The problem was that I didn't trust my own feelings enough to recognize love when it was right in front of me. We stood there in her cluttered office, surrounded by the evidence of 7 years of marriage that we'd both misunderstood in different ways. I'd thought I was married to someone who loved me as much as I loved her. She'd thought she was married to someone she couldn't love properly. We'd both been wrong. What happens now? She asked quietly. Now that you know everything, now that you've seen how messy and complicated my feelings have been, can you forgive me for not recognizing sooner what we had? Can you forgive me for all the times I held back because I was afraid I wasn't feeling enough? I thought about that question. About 7 years of what I'd thought was mutual devotion, but was actually something more complex and maybe more meaningful. About a woman who'd committed her life to me even when she wasn't sure she could love me the way she thought she should. About the slow, quiet growth of feelings that she'd finally learned to recognize and trust. Claire, I said, there's nothing to forgive. You've been loving me this whole time. You just didn't know what to call it. But I let you think I felt the same way you felt, she said. I let you believe our marriage was something it wasn't. Our marriage was exactly what it needed to be, I said. Two people who cared about each other, committed to building a life together, learning how to be better partners every day. Maybe you didn't feel the same intensity of emotion that I felt, but you showed up. You chose me. You built this life with me even when you weren't sure where it was leading. That's not nothing, Claire. That's everything." She was crying again, but softer now. "I was so scared you'd leave if you knew the truth. So scared you'd decide I wasn't worth all the love you'd invested in me." "Leave you," I said, reaching out to touch her face. "Claire, I just found out that my wife spent 7 years falling in love with me. That she chose me every day, even when it was hard, even when she wasn't sure what she was feeling. That she trusted me enough to build a future with me, to try to have children with me, to let me love her even when she didn't understand her own heart yet. Why would I leave you? You're finally ready to love me back." "I always loved you back," she said, leaning into my touch. "I just didn't know how to recognize it. I didn't know that love could be quiet and steady and practical and still be real. I thought it had to be overwhelming to count." "Maybe overwhelming love burns out," I said. "Maybe the kind of love that grows slowly and gets stronger over time is actually better. Maybe the fact that you chose me even when you weren't sure what you were feeling means more than if you'd fallen for me instantly." "Do you really believe that?" she asked. "After reading about all my doubts and analysis and emotional distance." "I believe that you're here," I said. "I believe that you chose to stay married to me, to build a life with me, to try to have children with me, even when you were questioning your own feelings. I believe that you finally figured out what I've been trying to show you for 7 years. And I believe that our marriage is going to be better now that we both understand what we actually have, instead of what we thought we were supposed to have." She kissed me then, and it felt different than any kiss we'd shared in 7 years of marriage. Not more passionate, exactly, but more honest, more present, like she was finally allowing herself to feel everything she'd been holding back. "I love you, Marcus," she said against my lips. "I love you in ways I didn't even know were possible. I love your steadiness and your kindness and your terrible dad jokes. I love how you make coffee perfectly every morning and how you remember to water my plants when I forget. I love that you've been patient with me all this time, letting me figure out my own heart without pressuring me to feel things on your timeline. I love you too," I said. "I love that you're careful and thoughtful about big decisions. I love that you don't do anything halfway, including falling in love with me. I love that you've been protecting my feelings all these years, even when it meant questioning your own. I love that you finally trust yourself enough to let yourself love me." We held each other in the afternoon light filtering through her office window, and I thought about how different this moment was from what I'd imagined when I first opened her diary. I'd expected to find evidence that my wife didn't really love me. Instead, I'd found evidence that she'd been learning to love me in her own way, on her own timeline, with her own complications and doubts and eventual breakthrough. "What do we do with the diaries?" she asked. "Do you want me to throw them away? Pretend this conversation never happened?" "I want you to keep them," I said. "I want you to write in them about this conversation, about finally understanding your own feelings, about what happens next in our marriage now that we both know the truth." "What is going to happen next?" she asked. "We're going to love each other better," I said. "We're going to have this baby, and we're going to be honest about our fears and hopes instead of trying to manage each other's expectations. We're going to build the rest of our life together with both our cards on the table." Even knowing that I spent years not understanding my own heart? "Especially knowing that," I said. "Because now I know that when you choose me, you're choosing me with full knowledge of what that choice means. You're not choosing me because you got swept away by emotion, or because you haven't thought it through. Equally enough, you're choosing me because you've spent 7 years figuring out exactly who I am and exactly what being married to me feels like, and you've decided it's what you want." She smiled then, the first genuine smile I'd seen from her since she walked into the office and found me with her diaries. "It is what I want," she said. "It's exactly what I want. You're exactly who I want. I'm sorry it took me so long to understand that." "You weren't late," I said. "You were just thorough." That evening, we had the most honest conversation of our entire marriage. We sat on our couch with takeout Chinese food and talked about everything: her fears about motherhood, my insecurities about whether I was enough for her, the ways we'd both been protecting each other's feelings, sometimes at the expense of our own honesty. "I need to tell you something about the miscarriage," she said at one point, picking at her lo mein with her chopsticks. I felt relieved when it happened, not entirely relieved. I was sad too, and I grieved for Emma just like you did, but part of me was relieved that I didn't have to prove I could be a good mother yet. I set down my container of Kung Pao chicken and looked at her. That doesn't make you a monster, Claire. That makes you human. Being scared about becoming a parent doesn't mean you won't be a good parent. I was afraid you'd think I was horrible if you knew I felt relief, she said. I was afraid you'd think I didn't want Emma, didn't want to have children with you. I just want you to want them for the right reasons, I said. I want you to want children because you actually want to be a mother, not because you think it's what I need from you to be happy. I do want to be a mother, she said. I want to see what kind of father you'll be. I want to raise children who have your kindness and patience and sense of humor. I want to build a family with you. I'm just scared I won't be naturally good at it the way you will be. You'll be good at it in your own way, I said. The same way you've been good at being my wife in your own way. Not the way you thought you were supposed to be good at it, but the way that actually matters. We talked about the ways we'd both been performing in our marriage without realizing it, how I'd been so eager to please her that I'd sometimes forgotten to have my own opinions and preferences, how she'd been so focused on being the wife she thought I wanted that she'd sometimes forgotten to be herself. I want to know what you actually think about things, I said. I want to know when you disagree with me, when you want something different than what I want, when you're annoyed with me. I want to be married to you, not to some idealized version of you that you think I prefer. I want you to stop trying so hard to make me happy all the time, she said. I want you to make decisions based on what you want too, not just on what you think will please me. I want to feel like I'm married to a whole person, not just someone who exists to love me. We made plans to go to couples counseling, not because our marriage was in crisis, but because we wanted to learn how to be more honest with each other going forward. We talked about practical things too, how we wanted to handle our finances, how we wanted to prepare for the baby, how we wanted to navigate the next phase of our relationship. But mostly we just talked about who we actually were when we weren't trying to be the perfect husband and wife for each other. It was the best conversation of our marriage, and also the scariest. Because for the first time, we were both being completely real with each other. No performance, no careful management of expectations, no protecting each other from difficult truths. Just two people who loved each other figuring out how to love each other better. I have a confession, I said as we were cleaning up the empty takeout containers. What? She asked, looking worried. Sometimes I wondered if you were settling for me, I said. Sometimes I looked at other couples who seemed more passionate, more obviously crazy about each other, and I wondered if you wished you'd ended up with someone who excited you more. Marcus, she said, stopping what she was doing to look at me. You didn't excite me in the beginning because I was scared of excitement. I'd been hurt by exciting men before. What drew me to you was that you were safe and kind and steady. What made me fall in love with you was realizing that safe and kind and steady are actually the most exciting things in the world when you're building a real life with someone. Really? I asked. Really, she said. Passion is fun for a few months, but what you've given me, security, partnership, unwavering devotion, someone I can count on completely, that's what makes a good life, that's what makes a good marriage, that's what I want for the rest of my life. That night, we made love differently than we had in years, not more passionately, but more honestly. She didn't perform enthusiasm or worry about whether she was responding the right way. I didn't try so hard to prove how much I adored her. We just loved each other as we actually were, with all our complications and imperfections and newly understood feelings. Afterward, lying in bed together, she said, I want to write about this, about today, about this conversation, about finally understanding what we have. What will you write? I asked. That I spent 7 years learning how to love you, and it was worth every minute of confusion and doubt to get here, she said. That some love stories aren't about lightning bolts and instant recognition. Sometimes they're about two people who choose each other every day until choosing becomes loving, becomes being unable to imagine life any other way. Will you read it to me when you're done? I asked. If you want me to, she said. I'd like that, I said. I'd like to hear our story from your perspective, now that I know how it ends. 3 months later, Claire gave birth to our son, David. He was healthy and perfect, with Claire's blue eyes and my stubborn chin. Watching her hold him for the first time, seeing the immediate, overwhelming love that flooded her face when the doctor placed him on her chest, I knew that all her worries about not being able to love him properly had been unfounded. She was a natural mother, just as I'd known she would be. But more than that, she was finally a natural wife. Not because she'd changed fundamentally, but because she'd stopped questioning her own heart and started trusting the love that had been there all along. Our marriage now was different from what it had been for our first 7 years, but also exactly the same. We still had our morning coffee together, still split household chores without discussion, still made decisions as a team. But now there was an honesty to our interactions that hadn't been there before. Claire no longer worried about whether she was loving me correctly. I no longer worried about whether I was too much, too eager, too devoted. We both just loved each other as we were, in the ways that came naturally to us. I never wrote about this in the diaries, she told me one evening when David was about 6 weeks old. We were both exhausted from sleepless nights, but happy in the way that new parents are happy, overwhelmed, but grateful. Wrote about what? I asked, bouncing David gently to keep him from fussing. How proud I've always been to be your wife, she said. How much I've always enjoyed telling people about your work, your accomplishments, your kindness. How good it's always felt to be the person you chose to love. Why didn't you write about that? I asked. Because I thought pride and enjoyment weren't enough, she said. I thought if I wasn't breathless with passion, it meant I was shortchanging you somehow. But pride and enjoyment and deep affection and genuine liking, those are pretty good foundations for a marriage, aren't they? They're the best foundations, I said. They last longer than passion, they survive sleepless nights and mortgage payments and all the ordinary difficulties of building a real life together. She smiled and leaned against my shoulder, watching our son's face as he fell asleep in my arms. I love our ordinary life, she said. I love our Tuesday morning breakfasts and our weekend grocery trips and our boring conversations about household maintenance. I love that we're not dramatic or turbulent or constantly having to prove our love to each other. I love that we're steady. I love that too, I said. I love that we're the kind of couple who've been married for 7 years and still like spending time together. Who can sit in comfortable silence or talk for hours, depending on our mood. Who make each other laugh and take care of each other when we're sick and dream about the future together. Do you ever wonder what would have happened if you hadn't found the diaries? She asked. If I'd never had that breakthrough moment, never learned to recognize what I was feeling. I think you would have figured it out eventually, I said. Maybe it would have taken longer, maybe it would have happened differently, but I think you would have gotten there. Love has a way of making itself known, even when we're not looking for it in the right places. And if I hadn't? She asked. If I'd spent our whole marriage not understanding my own heart? Then we would have had a good marriage anyway, I said. Because love isn't just about feelings, Claire. It's about choices and actions and commitment. And you've been choosing and acting and committing to me every day for 7 years. That's love, whether you recognized it or not. She was quiet for a long moment. I wish I could go back and tell that woman writing in the diary 7 years ago that she was already in love, she said. That she didn't need to figure out how to feel differently, she just needed to trust what she was already feeling. Maybe that's true for a lot of people, I said. Maybe there are lots of people out there questioning whether what they feel is enough, whether they're loving correctly, whether they're capable of the kind of love they think they're supposed to have. Maybe most love is quieter and more practical than we're taught to expect. Maybe that's why I kept writing in the diaries, she said. Maybe some part of me knew I was documenting something important, even if I didn't understand what it was at the time. What are you documenting now? I asked. She'd continued writing in her diary every few days since our conversation 3 months ago, but now her entries were different. Less analytical, more grateful, less worried about what she should be feeling, more appreciative of what she actually felt. Joy, mostly, she said. Contentment, gratitude for this life we've built together, love that I finally recognize and trust and don't have to question anymore. Can I read the entries from the last few months sometime? I asked. If you want to share them. I want to, she said. They're love letters, really. Love letters to you, to David, to the family we've created together. Love letters to the marriage I finally understand. David stirred in my arms, making the soft sounds that meant he'd be waking up soon and wanting to eat. Claire reached over to take him from me, settling him against her chest with the ease that had surprised us both. She'd been worried she wouldn't have maternal instincts, but they'd kicked in immediately and completely. Marcus, she said as David began to nurse, thank you for reading the diaries that day. Thank you for confronting me with the truth instead of pretending you'd never seen them. Thank you for loving me enough to want to understand what was really going on in my heart, even when it was complicated and messy. Thank you for writing them, I said. Thank you for being brave enough to document your real feelings, even when they were confusing to you. Thank you for doing the work of figuring out your own heart, even when it took 7 years. Thank you for waiting, she said. Thank you for loving me steadily and patiently while I learned how to love you back. Thank you for never making me feel broken or wrong for not understanding my feelings sooner. We sat together in the soft light of our living room, our son sleeping peacefully in his mother's arms, and I thought about how different this moment was from anything I could have imagined when I first opened that diary 6 months ago. I'd thought I was going to discover that my wife didn't love me. Instead, I'd discovered that love is more complicated and more resilient than I'd ever understood, that it can grow quietly for years before being recognized, that it can survive doubt and confusion and even being analyzed to death, that sometimes the most profound love stories are the ones that don't look like love stories at all. Claire had spent 7 years learning to love me, but maybe I'd spent 7 years learning to love her too, learning that love doesn't always look the way we expect it to, that it's not always mutual in the same ways at the same times, that sometimes the most meaningful love is the kind that chooses commitment over convenience, partnership over passion, steady devotion over dramatic gestures. Our love story hadn't been perfect, it hadn't been simple or straightforward or instantly mutual, but it had been real, and it had been worth every moment of confusion and doubt and gradual understanding to get us here, to this quiet evening with our son, to this marriage that finally made sense to both of us, to this love that we both finally trusted and recognized and were proud to call our own. A year later, Claire published a book based on her diaries. She changed our names and some identifying details, but the core story remained true, the story of a woman who spent 7 years learning to recognize love and the man who loved her patiently while she figured it out. The book became unexpectedly popular, resonating with readers who recognized their own struggles to understand what love should feel like, what marriage should be, what it means to choose someone every day even when the feelings are complicated. Claire received hundreds of letters from people thanking her for showing them that love doesn't always look the way movies and novels suggest it should. That sometimes the deepest, most lasting love grows slowly and quietly. That questioning your feelings doesn't mean those feelings aren't real. That learning to love someone, really love them, not just feel overwhelmed by them, is sometimes a process that takes years to complete. I never expected this reaction, she told me one evening as we read through some of the letters together. David was asleep in his crib upstairs, and we were enjoying one of those rare quiet moments that new parents treasure. I thought people would judge me for not recognizing love when it was right in front of me. I think more people struggle with this than we realize, I said. I think a lot of marriages have some version of what we went through, one person loving more obviously, the other person questioning whether what they feel is enough. Most people just don't document it as thoroughly as you did. Or maybe most people don't have husbands who accidentally discover their diaries and force them to confront the truth, she said, smiling. That was the luckiest accident of my life, I said. Finding those diaries. Mine too, she said, even though it was terrifying at the time, even though I was sure it would end our marriage. It did end our marriage, I said. The marriage where we were both performing roles we thought the other person wanted, it ended that marriage and started a better one. The marriage where we love each other as we actually are, she agreed, instead of as we thought we were supposed to be. We still keep the diaries, all of them, including the new volumes Claire has filled since David was born. Sometimes we read entries together, marveling at how much we've both grown and changed while remaining fundamentally the same people who met at Sarah's party all those years ago. The early entries don't hurt to read anymore, they're just part of our story now, part of the long journey we took to get to where we are today. Do you think David will read these someday? Claire asked, gesturing to the shelf where the diaries now lived openly in our bedroom, no longer hidden or secret. Probably, I said. Do you mind if he does? I hope he does, she said. I hope he reads them and learns that love is more complicated and more resilient than fairy tales suggest. I hope he learns that it's okay if his feelings don't match what he thinks they're supposed to be. I hope he learns that the best marriages are the ones where both people keep choosing each other, even when it's complicated. What do you hope he learns about us specifically? I asked. That we loved each other the best way we knew how, she said. That we were honest with each other, eventually. That we built something good together, even when we didn't entirely understand what we were building. That love doesn't have to be perfect to be real. I reached over and took her hand, the same hand I'd held through 7 years of marriage, through pregnancy and miscarriage and new parenthood, through the discovery of those diaries and the difficult conversations that followed. It felt exactly the same as it had always felt, warm, familiar, right. But now I knew that her hand in mine meant something different than I'd thought it meant for all those years. It meant she'd chosen me, was still choosing me, would keep choosing me. Not because she'd been swept away by overwhelming emotion, but because she'd carefully, thoughtfully, thoroughly decided that I was who she wanted to build a life with. That what we had together was worth committing to, worth protecting, worth calling love. I love you, Claire, I said, the way I'd said it thousands of times over the years. I love you too, Marcus, she said, the way she'd said it thousands of times in return. But now, finally, we both knew exactly what those words meant.